All right, biology students, today we will finish up our notes for this unit. You should have completed all the way through the cycles. Down, I think the phosphorus cycle was your last one. And today we'll wrap up our notes. Remember, we have an exam at the end of this week. Not a lot of information, so please know this information very well. You'll, of course use this to complete a quiz also at the end of this unit. So anyway, we have covered all the different types of cycles. Remember, cycles show us how matter, depending on what it is, whether it's water or phosphorus or nitrogen or whatever, passes through ecosystems and it cycles back into it and out of it. Okay. Remember that matter is not created or destroyed. It's simply transferred in different forms. The water cycle is a great way to see this. You know, water may be liquid. When it comes down in the form of rain, it's precipitation. It may even freeze up into ice, and then eventually it may become water vapor again through evaporation. So anyway, it's not created nor destroyed. Today we're going to look at energy, however. We've been looking at matter, so things we could physically measure or get our hands on. Energy is a little different. Energy is what matter uses to continue living, okay? So I like to call this pyramid models, and you'll see why in a little bit. We've got different pyramids, how it's almost like a triangle stacked on top of each other, and it helps display how energy comes and goes through ecosystems and through individual organisms. So an energy pyramid shows the distribution of energy among trophic levels. Remember trophic levels, we saw that in the food web. We've got a producer, we've got primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and so on and so forth. All ecosystems get their energy from sunlight. No matter what the ecosystem is, besides the very few that has to do with chemosynthetic organisms, but that is a small percentage. But most, by and large, ecosystems get their energy from sunlight. Think about why that is. Producers, which are required for all ecosystems to continue to flourish and survive, they have to get their energy from the sun through photosynthesis. They use that sunlight to make their own food. We're going to see that some energy is lost, but don't think it's destroyed. It's just not used by all the different organisms in the ecosystem, but it's lost as heat energy. Think about how that plays out in our life. We will eat food, right? We'll eat food, and we are able to carry on our life processes, whether it's thinking or writing or running or whatever. But we also give off a lot of heat. A lot of heat. You can touch I'm kind of touching my arm right now, and I can feel that it's warm. That is a form of energy. Our body releases it. It's not very efficient. No organisms are really very efficient at all using their energy. So we have to take in a lot more energy than we feel like we need, okay, because we're going to lose so much along the way. The law of conservation of energy, much like the law of conservation of matter, tells us that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply changes forms. It can be transferred in different forms. So think about that. We are eating food to acquire energy, right? And we're going to use that energy for life processes, but also heat's going to be lost along the way. Thing is, heat's not the energy being destroyed. It's simply changing forms. Heat is a form of energy, okay? So you can always think about it like energy that comes into the earth. It isn't just created nor destroyed. It just changes forms. It's always kind of been here. It's just changed forms. As long as the sun is shining, because like our last slide told us, the sun is what gives the source of energy to all ecosystems. As long as the sun is shining, we're going to have energy. We're going to have it. Now, the moment that sun stops shining, life here on earth will cease to exist because there is no more energy. It may last for just a little bit because of the energy that's still around us, but eventually that's going to be kind of lost, quote unquote, as heat. Let's just think about this a little bit more in depth. Energy is used for many purposes: movement, growth, thought, even eating requires energy to do it. Our body, as well as other organisms, plants, animals, both of them, your body's very inefficient at converting energy or food into useful energy. We lose it as heat. We also can lose some of it as waste. When we poop or pee, that waste does have some energy in it, but we've losing some of it because it's unused. It goes through our digestive system, let's say. Here's a picture of the digestive system over there. It goes through, and along the way, most of the energy got picked out from it, but some of it's still left over. It's left over. So there's an incredible amount of waste. This is much different than we see with all the cycles. We see there's not a lot of wasted things. It just kind of comes and goes. The energy cycles, there's a lot of waste. Some terms that you need to know. One is biomass. Biomass is the measure of the total dry mass of organisms in a given area. That sounds really wordy to say this. If we're looking at an ecosystem, say like the forest, how much organisms are there? Okay, think about it, biomass like this. If there's an ant, there's not a lot of mass there. There's not a lot of matter that makes up that ant. At the same token, there may be a cougar or a mountain lion there too. There's a lot of mass given in that mountain lion. Granted, there's probably going to be maybe one or two mountain lions or cougars. There's going to be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, and possibly even millions of ants in that area. So what they make up, what they lack in their individual mass, they certainly would make up for in numbers, because you would add all of those up, because it's a total mass of organisms in a given area. When consumers eat producers, a great deal of energy is lost as heat and waste, as we've already said. In fact, only 10%, this is an important one, only 10% of energy is transferred between each trophic level. Okay, you can kind of see here, if we think about it, producers get 100% of the energy that's coming in. We're just kind of calling it energy unit. We're not worried about the technical names for it. A lot of it's going to be released as heat. Yes, even plants release heat as they continue to grow and live. Only about 100% came in. About 10% would be left for those first level consumers of 10% of the amount of energy that came in initially. And then we would break it down about 10%. So that would be a 1% is the second level. And even at your tertiary level, maybe only 0.1%. So energy, most of it is lost. About 90% of it is lost at each trophic level. Only about 10% makes it. The energy pyramid is a diagram that compares energy used by each trophic levels. Always the base is made up of producers, okay? And it shows us how much energy is lost in each succeeding trophic level. There's also called a biomass pyramid. This is simply, as we looked at with biomass, I kind of had those out of order, sorry about that. The biomass, the amount of mass that makes up different organisms. So in this ecosystem, we may have 1,500 grams of grain, okay? That's all the mass that makes them up. Maybe only 500 grams of chicken and 50 grams of human tissue. Okay, those are certainly very, very tiny numbers. Those are not realistic if you know what grams are. But you will see, if you're a higher level consumer, there can only be a certain number of you based on how much producers or even lower level consumers there are. This human on its own would need a bunch of chickens in order to live. If you just have one chicken here, it's not going to be able to survive very long. If you've only got a little small portion of grain, it's not going to be enough to sustain this life form here, okay? So we'll see biomass pyramids kind of reflect energy and also something called numbers pyramids here in a minute. They all kind of share this commonality that the base is so much bigger. Pyramid of numbers, it just simply shows the individual number of organisms there are. Like this hawk here, this one hawk needs lots of snakes in order to eat. These snakes need lots of mice and grasshoppers in order to eat, and they need, these primary consumers need a whole mess of producers. Think about how this plays out and how we're going to see it later on in the next chapter. If these producers are cut in half suddenly, right? There's no more 1,000, let's just say 1,000 pieces of grass or tefets of grass here, and it's cut to 500. What's going to happen to these numbers? They're probably going to shrink, right? Because these are depending on this base for life. If we cut these in half, we can predict that these primary consumers will be cut in half as well. If they're cut in half, guess what's going to happen here? If there's not enough mice for these snakes to eat, eventually these snakes are either going to leave or they're going to die. We could probably predict that these will be cut in half, and the hawk may not even have enough life or food sources to live anymore there, okay? So numbers show us simply how many there are, okay? You could see these pyramids inverted or turned upside down. Still the same principle. It would just be a triangle here that's upside down. The smallest part shows a higher level consumer. The large base, no matter if it's on top, shows producers. So let's take a look. Let's interact. Yeah, okay. Let's take a look at these two. You might even see some of these, say like on your exam this week. Yay, these are super great. All right, this is a pyramid of energy. It tells us right here. So this ecosystem, a deciduous forest ecosystem, it shows us all these different types of producers. We've got trees and ferns and grasses. I mean, this tells us how much energy there is. We're not worried about the certain unit, We just know there's 6,011 energy units, okay, at the base. So where they get their energy from, of course, the sun. The next level, this first order heterotrophs, or the primary consumers. We see some deer, we see some mice, we see some birds, a rabbit it looks like. There's only 623 energy. Now, where did it all go? Only about 10% is able to be taken in by those primary consumers. Remember, the other 90% or so released as waste. The law of conservation of energy tells us that it can't be created or destroyed. It's not just gone. It is released. I hate using the word lost because it does kind of infer, destruction or whatever. But it's released as heat. It's released as heat or waste, right? So only 10% moves up the pyramid. Okay, second order or second level consumers, heterotrophs. We've got some snakes and looks like an owl and some other things here. We know that they consume these first order heterotrophs. Now look at the energy, 61. Do you notice the trend? We have about 6,000. We've got about 600. We've got about 60. That's 10%. That moves up the pyramid. And then we've got this third order, this tertiary consumers. We've got a hawk, and it looks like maybe a wolf or something. 6 energy makes it up. So if we only had 6,000 energy that came from the sun and the producers here, by the time it got up to the tertiary consumer, only about 6 energies left. So what does that mean? It means there needs to be a whole lot of producers at the base in order to sustain a good amount of life up here. And this is typically why you see higher level consumers being far fewer in a number than, say, like primary consumers. You go into a certain ecosystem like a deciduous forest, that's what we have around us, you won't see near as many hawks as you will, squirrels or ground squirrels or anything like that, because you need a whole lot of those because of the energy levels to sustain life. Right? If we have way too many hawks, what's going to begin to happen? They're going to start picking off these primary and these secondary consumers to the point where they can't sustain life anymore. And it all comes down to the numbers. It comes down to the energy level that's able to get there. Same thing with a drought. If a drought comes in and these producers are wiped out, you'll start to see these other levels, these trophic levels, wiped out or severely minimized, okay, severely taken down. You've got to have good bases in order to build up the next levels. Okay, so that's a pyramid of energy. It measures the energy. This is a pyramid of numbers still in the deciduous forest. Remember, this pyramid of numbers just looks at total number of organisms. Okay, and we'll see some numbers here that are interesting. Now notice these don't play always exactly like the 10%. Going back real quick, pyramid of energy is always about 10% per trophic level goes up. So 6,000 to 600 to 60 to 6. Okay, and we could, if there was a quadrary consumer in this ecosystem, it would be less than 1, energy at that point. Now numbers, it does follow a pattern, but not quite like the 10% that we've ever figured out. Say about 8,000, this is about 4,000 or so. So we see it's about cut in half. Okay, this is a pretty good drop down to 1,500, and then a huge drop down to 50 total organisms at that tertiary trophic level or third order. Okay, we can see that it minimizes. No ecosystem that's sustainable would you see this number being bigger than these numbers, right? It's not sustainable, meaning it won't last, because if there's that many tertiary, they're eventually going to eat these out, right? They're going to be gone, okay, to the point of possible extinction that would cause these to have to move on. Let's look at some questions real quick. Only 10% of the energy storage in the organism can be passed on the next trophic level. The remaining energy, some of the used in the process. The rest is, which one? Eliminated is heat, of course. Eliminated is heat. That's where the energy goes. It's not lost. It's not destroyed. It's just removed as heat. What type of pyramid shows the amount of living tissue? Remember, we're worried about the mass, biomass. Repeated movement of water between surface, and this is going back to our other notes. Of course, that's the water cycle. Which of the following is not recycled in the biosphere? And that's a little tricky because energy is not recycled. It's not recycled. Which of the processes by which organisms convert? It's nitrogen fixation. You can pause these and look at it. Bacteria is the most important player.